Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 13th of July of 2026. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. We have several important updates worth discussions. First of all, according to information we have, Zelensky submits bills to extend martial law and mobilization. Both regimes are planned to be extended for 3 months starting August 2nd, 2026. If approved by the Verkhovna Rada, martial law and mobilization will continue until October 31st of 2026. So this is a very important situation. First of all, this means that the conflict with the Russians, between Russia and Ukraine, will continue until October 31st of 2026. Furthermore, as you can see, Zelensky submitted these bills much earlier than expected. Usually, Zelensky submits such bills between 15 and 25th of the second month of these regimes, but for some reason Zelensky decided this month to make it earlier. First of all, this is something like a clear message to Russians that Zelensky is not going to play these games with negotiations and talks. He is ready for the prolongation of the conflict with the Russian Federation. And the second thing why Zelensky has submitted this law so early is the thing that Zelensky today arrived in France. So this is another important situation. And here we have this video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see Zelensky arriving in France. Another important thing is that Zelensky landed in Paris last night. So yesterday, meeting with Macron scheduled for today, and according to information we have, the meeting has already started. Another important thing that usually when Zelensky leave the territory of Ukraine, usually historically Zelensky's foreign trips coincide with massive Russian strikes on Ukraine. So which means that tonight, between the 13th and the 14th of July, we may expect another massive attack from the Russian side because Zelensky is not on the territory of Ukraine. So, and this is another reason why Zelensky submitted these bills about martial law and mobilization. So he left Ukraine in advance, and he doesn't know for sure when exactly he will be able to return back. So he doesn't know this. Maybe the Russians would attack Ukraine, Kiev, starting from the 14th of July till the end of this month every single day, and basically Zelensky would not have these possibilities to submit bills to extend martial law mobilization to the Verkhovna Rada. So that's why he decided to make this in advance and left Ukraine. Another important thing about the next phase of the special military operation, and this time this update concerns the European Union. Today we received the report that citizens of Ukraine who do not receive a special exemption from mobilization will no longer be able to enter the European Union. This applies to women as well. The European Commission plans to announce the rule change in July. The new rules are expected to come into effect in March 2027, which means that the Ukrainians have just several months left, probably to live on the territory of Europe, and then they will be departed back on the territory of Ukraine. And of course, when talking about Ukraine, about their mobilization process, of course, these men would be mobilized immediately and would be sent to the line of combat contact. So all these things tell us just about one thing, that the Ukrainians, the European Union, continue preparing themselves for the military campaign of 2027. Meanwhile, we are in the middle of the summer military campaign, and we see that these days, and starting from June and July of 2026, both the Russians and the Ukrainians began attacking and destroying infrastructure through the southern regions. As for the previous nights, the Russians attacked the Odesa region, and we have a lot of updates about the situation in this area. First, it was reported that the Russians attacked just one target or one area of the Odesa region, and the sources were talking about the southwestern parts, about the port infrastructure of the city by the name of Chornomorsk. But later we received additional geolocation, and we came to conclusion that the Russians were attacking two areas, the port of Chornomorsk and the territory to the north of the city of Odessa. As for the territory to the north of the city, we have a bus station, truck station. As you can see from this satellite picture, from this zoom, we can see dozens, maybe maybe 100 of vehicles in this area that were attacked by Russians during the previous nights. And this video was published. Here we can see these trucks, these buses completely wiped out as a result of the Russian overnight attack. So in this video we can see the same parking site, the same territory, but from another angle. Here we have fire crews trying to extinguish the fire, and through these pictures we can see the consequences of attack. As you can see, many trucks, many buses were destroyed by Russians. The Russians most likely believed that the Ukrainians were using these vehicles to deploy drones as close as possible to the line of combat contact. As for the city of Chornomorsk, the Russians attacked, according to information we have, several vessels in the Black Sea. First we received this picture where we can see the consequences of attack, and later we received this picture where we can see how the Ukrainians were trying to extinguish the fire. So we have lots of updates from this area as well. Lots of pictures were published, and another important thing is that a grain company was forced to suspend all activities through the Odesa region infrastructure. So as we can see, the Russians decided to deal significant damage to the port infrastructure of the Odesa region as retaliation to the situation that is currently taking place in the area of the Sea of Azov. But there is an important thing worth attention, that since the beginning of the retaliation from the Russian side, the Russians were only attacking the city of Odessa, the city of Chornomorsk, so the territory around Odessa. And we haven't received even a single report whether the Russians were attacking or not the territory in the most southwestern parts of the Odessa region. We're talking about the cities like Reni, like Izmail, and many other different towns and villages and cities located along the river of Danube, which means that along the river of Danube, which means that the Ukrainians still have possibilities to supply and to receive cargo and military cargo from the NATO countries, and then to retransfer this cargo further deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. So this is which means that the Russian retaliation is limited, or at least Russians will continue expanding the zone of counterattacks when they finish with the Odessa region. Who knows? As of now, we see what we can see. Another important thing is, as for the Ukrainian side, they continue attacking Russian vessels and Russian tanks in the area of the Sea of Azov, and during the previous 12 hours another video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources where we can see attacks carried out by the Ukrainians. Lots of tanks and tankers and vessels were attacked. The pro-Ukrainian sources reported that 15 tanks and tankers and vessels were destroyed, and it seems that we can see complete collapse of the Azov Sea communication as Azov Sea territory without any chances, at least in the near future, to restore the logistics and transportation through this territory. We have lots of videos confirming that the Russians as of now can't do anything with the situation, but you know that the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, today stated that the Russians right now is also developing a system for supplying Crimea with fuel, which will be very difficult for the Ukrainians to reach. So which means that maybe in coming days the Russians will introduce something that will change the game of the Black Sea area. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kherson direction, about the Nikolaev and Kherson direction. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources published a very interesting video. You know that almost every single month, once a month, we talk about the Kinburn Spit and about the southwestern parts of the Kherson region, and we talk about a possible landing operation from the Ukrainian side. And of course, when talking about any landing operation in the area of the Kinburn Spit or Crimea, it was always very difficult to imagine how exactly the Ukrainians were planning to implement this operation. But despite these problems with imagination, we've been always talking about the situation. And today, pro-Ukrainian sources published a very interesting update revealing probably how exactly the Ukrainians are going to do this. And this video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see, according to a pro-Ukrainian source, that the Ukrainians Ukrainians during the previous days managed to land a robotic system on the territory of the Kinburn Spit. So as you can see, this is not just one robotic system, this is at least 3 equipment at the same time. We can see a drone flying over this territory, we can see a boat that brought this robotic system, and we can see the robotic system itself. So this is not something like an attempt to take on the complete control the Kinburn Spit from the Ukrainian side. This is something like probably something like a test operation, or not even a test operation, but something like a media operation with the purpose to show sponsors and investors how exactly the landing operation on the territory of Kinburn Spit may be carried out by the Ukrainians with the support of the Western countries. So this robotic system haven't managed to achieve anything. We have just a landing just 3 meters on the territory of Kinburn Spit, and just a small just attack or fire on some facility or some construction which is located along the shore. So that's it, nothing more, but this is something like a signal. And if the Ukrainians are going to carry out a landing operation ever on the territory of the Kinburn Spit or on the territory of Crimea, now it's become clear that this is not going to be a classical landing operation with troops, with infantry. First of all, this is going to be just a robotic landing. We're using probably tens or dozens or hundreds of robotic systems, and their first task would be to secure certain square kilometers, thousands or hundreds of square kilometers of territories, and only then the Ukrainians would send infantry. So this is most likely how a possible landing operation may look like, and from this perspective, we see that from this perspective, of course, Ukrainians and the Western countries have at least small chances to show a media victory. Imagine yourself hundreds of robotic systems moving across the Kinburn Spit, and of course, with such a video, Zelensky and Ukraine would be able to receive additional military packages or military aids worth tens of billions of euros or dollars. Obviously, this is a possible situation. Now let's move further. Let's discuss more updates. During the previous 12 hours, the Russians attacked the territory along the line of combat contact. The Russians, according to different sources, for the first time attacked a track along the N11 road between the cities Kryvyi Rog and Dnipro, which means that now the Russians are trying to establish complete control, complete fire control over these territories between the river of Dnipro and basically already a central part of Ukraine. So the Russians right now are trying to establish complete control over these territories, and they will attack more and more vehicles, trucks and logistics gas stations through this territory with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to move their forces further deep inside of the territory of Ukraine and reduce Ukraine's possibilities to attack the southern regions of Russia and the territory of the Sea of Azov, because, for example, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians once again attacked the city of Saratov, Stavropol, and as a result of attack, a gas station was damaged. At least several fuel tanks were completely wiped out, as you can see according to this video. And we just discussed the situation in the area of the Sea of Azov, and of course the situation is also difficult through the territory of Crimea, so which means that the Russians will shift their focus in this area with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area and to reduce their mid-range strikes capabilities. Moving further, the Zaporizhzhia region, the Russians published a very interesting video, and in this video we can see the Rubicon squad attacking Ukraine's logistics through the northern parts of the Zaporizhzhia region. In this video we can see dozens of episodes of how Russians were attacking vehicles, constructions, buildings, equipments of the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of the city of Zaporizhzhia and further to the east. If I hover this icon, you will see the places where the video and episodes of that video were geolocated. So as you can see, the Russians tried to establish deep control over the Zaporizhzhia region before moving further in the direction of the city of Orikhiv, and it seems that the Russians managed to do this or about to establish this control. As for the changes on the ground, the Russians, during the previous 24 hours, continued attacking the city of Orikhiv. Another position was wiped out by Russians in the central part of the agglomeration, so we're talking about these multi-story buildings. Furthermore, the Russians continue their counter-offensive operation in the area of the city of Stepnogorsk, and during the previous 24 hours, additional changes were recorded through the eastern parts of the city. I would like to remind you that several weeks ago, the Ukrainians managed to recapture the city of Stepnogorsk, and now the Russians, after they introduced additional forces, began counterattacks with the purpose to recover their lost positions. As for the eastern Zaporizhzhia flank, during the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources reported that Russians improved their positions through the eastern parts of the settlement of Lubitske. And these are the small changes on the ground between the dates. This is a very important offensive operation, and as we discussed during the previous videos, the Russians are tasked to cut T0408 road that goes through the western parts of the settlement of Lubitske, and if Russians are able to establish complete control over the territory, this will lead to unpredictable logistical consequences for the city of Orikhiv, because, as you know, the Russians have established already complete control over the Tavriska and Yurkovka supply lines that go in the direction of the city of Orikhiv, and now the Russians are trying to cut physically more logistic lines that go from the city of Orikhiv in the northern direction. And from this semi-encircled situation, the Russians most likely would continue offensive operation trying to attack the city of Orikhiv from behind, and this is going to be probably a major battle of the group of forces east for the military campaign of the 2026 year. Now let's move further. As for the city of Dobropolye, during the previous 12 hours, we were receiving lots of updates that the Russians continue advancing in the area of the settlement of Dobropolye. Many sources publish different maps showing changes on the ground, but as we can see, we have no real changes on the ground. No changes, no infiltration zones, just lots of reports and the Russian activities of FPV drones. In this video, we can see how Russians were attacking logistics of Ukrainians to the north of the settlement of Dobropolye, trying to probably cut the city from supply and support. The Slaviansk-Kramatorsk direction, these days we see a very big activity of Russians to the east of the city of Kramatorsk, which means that the Russians right now try to accelerate the Kramatorsk offensive operation. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. The Russians are trying to create a strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal, and now the Russians are trying to take under complete control everything along this red line. For these purposes, the Russians need to take under complete control this dense network of the fortifications and this pocket. There are very heavy clashes along the entire line. The Ukrainians show fierce resistance, but despite the resistance, the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continued attacking gas stations through the Slaviansk-Kramatorsk-Drushkovka agglomeration, and different sources reported that there are just several gas stations left. The Kharkiv direction, or the area of responsibilities of the group of forces west, during the previous 24 hours, additional gas stations were destroyed by Russians on the Kharkiv-Slaviansk Highway MO3. Furthermore, the Russians attacked positions of the armed forces of Ukraine to the west of the river Oskol. Most likely, the Ukrainians used this territory as a logistic hub for regrouping and sending troops further in the direction of the river itself. The Russians managed to discover this base of the armed forces of Ukraine, and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked this territory using aviation, using FABs, dealing significant damage, basically reducing the settlement of Grushevka and positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along railways till ruins. Moving further, as for the northern directions, we have changes just in the area of the northern parts of the city of Sumy. The Russians improved their positions in the area of Mala Slobodovka, and the Russians improved their positions on the way towards the city of Ulanovo. As for the city of Sumy itself, today local sources stated that there is now only one patrol station left in all of Sumy. A few stations have still got auto gas, as these tanks are usually located slightly away from from gasoline and diesel. It will be interesting to see if Russia allows to the one to keep functioning or take it out. So very high chances that in coming days there will be no more gas stations through the city of Sumy, and most likely with this situation we'll see the announcement of the Sumy evacuation, because something tells me that during summer of 2026 the Ukrainians would be forced to announce this evacuation. As for the long-range strikes of the armed forces of Ukraine, today we received a report that the Ukrainians tried to attack the city of Moscow. The Russians, according to information we have, managed to repel this attack, but it seems that several missiles or rockets or drones of the armed forces of Ukraine fell on the territory of the city by the name of Solnechnegorsk, and as you can see, as a result of this situation, a fire broke out, and the fire crews during the day were trying to extinguish the fire and to stabilize the situation. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds us we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.